Welcome to another episode of the Black Heights Podcast, where our vision is to prepare African Americans for upward mobility in management and leadership positions globally. We do this by training, coaching, and exposing them to top level business professionals and executives. Tonight, we have another On Their Journey podcast where we'll be speaking to Mr. Billy Wroe about his long-term journey. So Mr. Wroe has over 20 years of experience in retail, recruiting, sales, management, and logistics. Billy has spent his last 18 years working as an analyst. Unlike many who have used a combination of academic verification and experience to obtain their professional careers, Billy has relied heavily on the mailroom methodology to establish his career as an analyst through leveraging on-the-job training and a hard work ethic. This man works hard. You can find him on YouTube as well. Outside of analytics, Billy is engaged in inspirational keynote speaking and empowerment coaching for the last 5 years. He has helped multiple clients develop clarity on their personal and professional objectives and encourage groups within small groups through communication. Recently, Billy made the decision to transition his weekly word video series content from Facebook to YouTube platform using Wroe. He has also created an Intersation series, which is a combination of interview and conversations that he launched in this year, actually, and he's looking to launch more series under that umbrella in Q1 2019. I love this mantra about Billy. The mantra is very simple, and he's been living by it since 2012. And it is, we are who we are today because of whom we practiced being yesterday. The question is, who are we practicing to be for tomorrow? That is an inspirational mantra, Billy. And I want to welcome you to the show. How you doing, my brother?
Oh man, I'm good. It's a little later here than it is there, but I'm definitely good and ready to go for tonight's conversation. Just one quick correction. It's 8 years of analytical experience, not 18 years. I
Wow.
wish it was 18 years. I'd be a lot probably smarter in the process, but I'll take 8 years. It's been a good run.
Wonderful. Wonderful, Billy. So let's get things started. Tell everyone, Billy, where you're from.
So I am from Northern California in the city of Sacramento, which is the capital of California. I grew up in a small suburb known as Del Paso Heights. We refer to it as DPH. And it wasn't a well-off suburb. It was definitely a lower to middle income suburb.
Mhm.
But I think that a lot of the lessons and a lot of the relationships that I built and learned in that community definitely prepared me for the man that I inevitably became today. So that is where I am from.
Very good. So tell everyone how you grew up.
So I grew up in a family of four.
Mhm.
I'm the youngest of actually of four children. However, my older two siblings are about 11 and 10 years older than I am. So I grew up with my immediate sibling, which is 3 years older than me. And my mother and my father, we all lived in the same household until about, I think my parents got divorced around 16 years old, when I was 16 years old. And then at that point, I lived with my mother. My father didn't live very far away. He was still within almost an arm's reach, it felt like. I definitely grew up in a loving household. There were definitely challenges in the household. But one of the things that I would say my household prepared me for was to be an independent thinker, in not only in business, but in my own personal life. I was never easily influenced by the peer pressures or anything of that nature. Like if I wanted to do it, or if I was doing it, it was because I wanted to do it. If I wasn't doing it, it was because I didn't want to do it. And I'm still very much in that way. We'll call it stubborn. However, I've learned to be a little more diplomatic about what I choose to do and what not to do.
Very good. Very good. So, being an independent thinker, explain to people what that means to you.
So independent thinking for me has always been about remaining true to who I was. And I
Mm-hmm.
am really, it goes back to understanding the points in my life where maybe I was unhappy or depressed or kind of like felt a little lost. Those were points in my life where I had strayed away from being who I really wanted to be. So being an independent thinker is really knowing who you are, what resonates with you, and staying and sticking to that path. One of the key things of growing up in the neighborhood that I grew up in, I spoke very proper, according versus the people that were in my neighborhood. They used a lot of slang. Now I
Mm-hmm.
could use slang, but it was a choice to speak with proper English because I understand through practice, 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 repetition, repetition, things start to stick, and then you start having, I think they're called Freudian slips, where you think you're talking proper and you slip back into the slang that you use more. So I just chose to speak in a proper manner, and in that, being an individual in that sense, there were times where I was made fun of, but I was also a fighter when I
Yep.
was a
Yep.
kid. So people may have made fun, but then they quickly realize that the way a person speaks does not transfer or translate into the way that they decide to throw their hands. So um, we quickly squashed the idea that people who speak proper in the neighborhood are necessarily the people that you want to pick on when I was growing up.
Got it. Got it. Got it. So let me do this. We looks like we have some viewers watching the show and in the
Okay.
chat. Let's make this interactive, everyone. So please, at any point in time, if you have any questions for myself or Billy, please type it in the chat and we'll try to get to it. So Billy, let's continue on. So let's talk about education. So where did you get your education from? Obviously, you were an articulate brother. You grew up with a great family and a loving household, 4 children. You're a father. Talk about, your journey to being an analyst through education.
So my journey to be an analyst through education is a very short journey. um, I would say I'm a high school graduate. I do not possess a college degree.
Hmm.
However, a lot of the education that I have received has been either A, through on the job training, people entrusting me to take on greater responsibilities based on my work ethic, or it has been in my own self. And motivating myself from within to go out and seek knowledge. So I'm an avid reader. One of the things that has really helped me in analytics and manipulating data has been understanding a language called VBA that is used to manipulate Excel. That language, I knew about it, but I did not know what it was. I was given a project when I first started doing analytical work as an entry-level cost analyst, and I looked at the project, and I'm really big on efficiencies. So when I looked at the project, I said, doing this once a month for 2 hours doesn't seem like an effective use of my time. And it also is probably going to give me carpal tunnel. So I think there's a way to automate this particular process. I don't know what it is, but let me do some research and figure it out, and I'll come back with the solution. So I literally have went to Barnes and Nobles and picked up a book on VBA, and went through that book. And now I mean, I've actually gifted that book to another Excel analyst a couple of years back. And now I just write VBA. And if there is something I don't know, I understand the language enough to look it up online and figure out how to create the solution. So I've always been, I think, a self-taught, self-driven individual. Structured, institutionalized education didn't work very well for me when I was in not graduate school, when I was in high school. And I still struggle with it today, because there's been opportunities where I've tried to go back to college and get an education. And it's not that I get bad grades. It's not that I test poorly. I typically get A's and B's in college courses. However, I just don't have the connection with the information. I feel like I had to do more learning of things I didn't want to learn versus the things that I really did want to learn. And I think there's an aspect of culture that comes with that. However, I just have yet to connect with the motivation that makes that something for me to want to pursue.
Got it. No, that's fair. Some of the smartest people that I know and the most hardworking people are people who are self-taught. I got a good friend of mine. His name is Ken Wexo, and I used to work with him for years. And this gentleman, seriously, he's brilliant, right? And a lot of the stuff that he's learned, especially in the technical area, was self-taught, right? And I think that's something. It shows that you really want it when you self-teach yourself how to do something, right?
Correct.
So let's talk about what are you an expert at? You talk about analysts, you talk about VBA. Is that your expertise?
Um, it's part of my expertise. I've always had a knack for being analytical. So looking at data, looking at puzzles, thinking about what they call the outside of the box solutions, that is something that has been kind of ingrained into my common sense to where I'll look at something that everybody's confused on, and I'm like, so why aren't we doing this? And to me, it's a very, I'm not trying to be condescending. It's just a very simple question, like, well, why haven't we used this? And they're like, that's genius. We never thought of that before. And so I've always had that analytical aspect about myself. In fact, that's how I got into analysis. I was asked, how analytical are you? And, what is it that you do? What is it that you know how to do in Excel? And I would say I'm an advanced user of Excel. I'm still constantly learning because Excel is such a big tool to use, but I'm an advanced user in Excel. And so that is one of the areas of my expertise, is to be able to take tons of amounts of data from a database and plug it into an Excel, and whether that's creating formulas, lookup tables, pivot charts, or whatever it may be, making sense of that data to tell a story. So I would say that is part of my expertise. The other part of my expertise has always been customer service, networking, and relationship building. Those areas kind of intertwine for me. A lot of my earlier career was spent in customer facing or call center work. And as a matter of fact, I became an analyst. I got picked up off of the call center floor to become an analyst. So, and that was because of how I interacted with customers and the rapport that I was able to build. And the analytical team was struggling with building that with the different operations around the state and a couple of different parts of the country. So they needed somebody who could look at data, make sense of data, and tell the story. However, they also needed somebody who could partner with operations managers, directors, to get that information out and hope to start building best practices and standard operating procedures.
Mm-hmm. So you answered the question that I was going to ask next, which was what led you into this career. But you kind of talked about what they were looking for, some of the skill sets that they needed, Excel and yada yada yada. Talk about the personal side of that. How do your personal relationships lead you to in this career as an analyst?
So how I perceive that it happened and how it really happened, maybe two different stories. But when I first started working in the last employer that I worked for, I was picked up as a call center analyst, or not analyst, I'm sorry, call center representative. And in my very probably like first couple of weeks, maybe 3 to 4 weeks, I would be in the break room and I would see new faces. And one of the things for me is I don't want to see you on a day-to-day basis and not know your name and not acknowledge you because I don't know who you are. So one of the people I actually acknowledged in the break room turned out to be the senior analyst. I didn't know he was a senior cost analyst at the time. But I asked him simply like, what is it that you do here? And he kind of explained a little bit about it. And that was probably 2 years before I actually became an analyst, and just interacting with him in that break room, whereas he kind of floats invisibly through the office because he's doing something that the call center is not doing, kind of put me on his radar. Mm-hmm. And then he would kind of walk through the call center, and whether going to his office or getting a cup of coffee, and he would just hear me interacting with our, I was a dedicated account rep. So I had a specific workload that was assigned to me. And so he would hear me interacting with them. He would hear me being able to make calls, be able to have like casual conversation, but get business done. And I think he liked that. And so when he reached out to me, literally there was no interview. There were just a few questions about what my analytical background is, what my Excel strength is. I'm big on giving examples of work. So I asked him to give me a particular document that was on paper, and I told him I would create that document as a soft copy on in Excel so that it would do all the calculations and just show him a sample of my work. And I think from there he just was just like, hey, go ahead and think about it over the weekend, and if you are interested in this role, this position is yours.
Well, that's powerful. Being a professional, reaching out, you basically created an opportunity by speaking to this gentleman and wanting to learn more about what he did, right? And what other people
Right.
do as well. Um, I was on your show last week on Interstations, which
Mhm.
was a wonderful show. And the topic
Yes.
was about creating opportunity. First, I don't think I did an introduction into how you and I know each other, but would you mind telling that story, Billy?
Yeah. So I can't remember which interstation that it was on that you actually were in the chat and you were participating in the chat. And I'm like, okay, this person, Antoine Wade, I don't know who he is, but he's participating. So, anytime somebody's participating, I'm happy to engage with them. But one of the things you said in the chat was, I would love to do an interstation. And interstation was still very new. Like, we might have been on like the third or fourth interstation. Um, and so you reaching out, I was like, okay, well, this is definitely a brother I want to reach out to. Did a little bit of research just to find you on LinkedIn. I was like, okay, well, he has a professional picture. He probably should have a LinkedIn profile or some means for me to find him. So once I was able to find you, I reached out and said, hey, I'd love to have you on the show, but I need to know who you are and what you're about. And so, we just started again. I think it's an equal strength for both of us. Started networking and started getting to know each other and having those conversations. And you jumping in on a couple of interstations and having great feedback. You jumping in on a couple of Wednesday words and helping me out with different words that were slipping my mind. And so it built a trust, and hearing some of the things that you're doing with Black Heights, it's like, man, why would I not want to have a person like this on interstations to start sharing about not only what they're doing, but how they've gotten themselves into that mindset to create their opportunities.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, that's a wonderful story, brother. And you had me on your show last week, and the topic was creating opportunities, and I went through what was my thought process of what creating opportunity means. I want to change this a bit and have you tell the audience here what creating opportunity means to you. Let me just do this. We have some people in the chat. Mrs. Tiffany Wade is in the chat. Mrs. Hazel, I can't pronounce her last name, but and I'm not even going to try it right now. But Miss Hazel's in here as well.
Alizaga.
Alizaga, there we go. Yes, we got some people in the chat, and they're all here. And no questions just yet, though. But the people in the chat, that they're definitely are proud of you, Billy. So tell people what creating opportunity means to you.
So there's two sides of that coin: creating opportunities for yourself, and then creating opportunities for others. Creating opportunities for yourself is very much how I got into analysis. People used to laugh because I would spend my free time, my spare time, dabbling in Excel and figuring out new formulas and figuring out new things and how to sort information. I think my first Excel experiment was using it as a black book and putting people's names and numbers in it so that I could alphabetize the numbers and find them. That was way before cell phones, so let's not talk about that. That was during the paging era. But that was, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was creating that opportunity for myself to have a better understanding of a tool that literally has taken my career to a completely different level when it comes to the type of work that I do today. And then also, I think creating opportunities for yourself is really seeking to find the lesson in the things that you're doing in life. My parents used to always say, "Oh, you're going to rot your brain playing video games. You're going to rot your brain playing video games." However, what they didn't understand is that it wasn't the game itself that I enjoyed so much. It was actually the necessary critical thinking in order to solve the different puzzles that were put in front of you to get to the objective. So for me, I was also learning not just critical thinking and problem solving. I was also learning the ability to set up an audio system, the ability to understand how electronics work. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the times when things stop working or things break down, I'm able to kind of dig in there. I'm not an engineer by any means, but able to dig in there on at least a basic level to create that opportunity to fix it. And that's the creating opportunities on my side. However, the creating opportunities for others is very much tied to my YouTube channel, First Row, where I am looking to create opportunities for other people to share their stories and share
Absolutely.
their experiences in order to hopefully build some resonance between all of us in understanding that our experience is very human and we are not isolated. We are not the only ones who struggle. We're not the only ones who get depressed. We're not the only ones who are happy and who are sad. We're not the only ones who mourn. And when you start sharing those experiences and creating those opportunities for other people, it kind of goes back to the base principles I was taught in network marketing. Like, you're helping to lift somebody else up. It automatically elevates you. And I don't mean elevation for show, but elevation for intellect, elevation for deeper thought, elevation for more effective reflection.
Yep. Very good. Very good. We have Mr. Darcellus Reed in the house. I had him on the show as well. Mr. Billy, so you created the opportunity to become an analyst. Now you're an analyst 3. What is it like being an analyst 3? What does that role entail? Tell the audience what your day-to-day is like as being an analyst 3.
So as being an analyst 3, I guess the easiest, the most simple way to put it to make it not be boring to the person who doesn't like data is I'm a storyteller of numbers. So I look at tons of data, whether they're numeric, alpha, doesn't matter. I look at tons of different types of data. And my role as an analyst is to compile that data and make sense of it so that I can tell the story, whether it's to a vendor business partner that we're working with, or if it's to an upper level management, a senior director, or something that the senior director needs to communicate to the vice president. So the fortunate thing about being an analyst in the organization that I started in, I was like one step away from the vice president. Well, I'm sorry, one step away from the president, and then they got a vice president, and then I was one step away from the vice president and 2 steps away from the president. So that helped me get into the role of producing reports for executive level observations. From the day to day, honestly, it can change. Some days you have very routine. I need to produce this particular report so I can give the production metrics on, how many different pieces of equipment we're picking up. But other days you'll have what are called ad hoc reports that have to be created. So somebody has a specific question. They come to you with what we call an ask. They say, this is what I'm asking you to do. And then your job as the analyst is to find where that data is at, or reach out and make the necessary network connections with other individuals in the organization in order to get the information you need to compile the story. And then again, wash, rinse, repeat. You compile the story, give that story, and you answer any questions regarding the story.
Storyteller of numbers. It almost sounds like you're a statistician. That's exactly what it is.
The mystery.
The mystery. That's exactly what it is. All right. So let's talk about something else. This is a topic where I want to get your opinion on what is it like being an African American in your role and in America to you.
In my role as an analyst, or in my role as a man in America? Because
let's do both roles. Parts. 2 parts.
Okay. So in my role as an analyst, I have found that there are other analysts that are African American men and women. Some of them are even beyond my level of intelligence as far as understanding different languages and other systems and databases. But what I also have noticed is that as I have moved up in the analytical world, the color seems to dissipate a little bit and recede as I move up. And so it's not that I don't think it happens necessarily because there's any kind of block for people of color, whether you're any minority, to get into the roles. I think sometimes it's more so that we don't see ourselves being successful in those roles. And that's one of the things I had to resolve within myself, is that the success that I'm experiencing today, I deserve that success. And I know that seems anti-humble, that it lacks humility in the comment. But when you feel like you don't deserve success and you feel like you don't deserve the things that you have, you tend to shy away from them and move back and not jump out and try to seize the opportunities that are presented. And so I think from the analytical standpoint, I do see a depreciation of minorities in my role, and in the groups that I go out to. I mean, we did a group outing, and yeah, I was the only African American male in that particular group outing.
Yeah,
So you see
it's
that.
interesting. It's interesting about that, Billy. It's I find that a lot of gentlemen who are on their path or on their journey to something even larger than where they are currently today, um, they are one of the only ones, and that's a challenge that we have to face, right? Because there's a lot of things that's behind that. But continue on, sir. Sorry about that. I just wanted to throw
Oh,
that piece of it in.
no, I agree with you. It is a challenge.
Yeah.
But I think also part of that journey is not getting so caught up on necessarily the colors that you see,
Mm.
and going back to what your question was about, how do you create opportunities? How do you create that opportunity to impart the vision in somebody else who may look similar to you, that they can also be in the same position that you're in?
Hmm.
And some of that is very straightforward conversations on, hey, look, you got to stop clowning around. You got to stop showing up to work late. You got to make sure you're punctual and that you present professionally, so that they know they can give you some of the professional roles, and you can stop being the worker bee in the network.
Mm.
And then on the other side of my experience as an African American male, I've had a very diverse experience. So one of the things is that I grew up in an era of the 80s and the 90s when racism was still very overt.
Mm.
So I was able to look at people and they would look at me, and you would be able to tell based on that interaction if they were racist or not. So it wasn't like, oh, we'll just talk about them when we're behind closed doors. No, it was very overt. So um, growing up in that era, it made me a little more callous to a certain degree of the things that, whether it was being called racial slurs, being perceived as what was very popular for the past like 5 years, the thug. And what it helped do is it helped shape and mold my mind to that these people really just don't know you. I mean, I remember at
Mm.
one point I was working for an employer, and after we had cleared the store of customers, my manager calls me to the back office and he's like, "So I got to write you up for sexual harassment." And I'm like, "What?"
Wow.
And yeah, I was, whoa, like, and this was before sexual harassment was popular. So I was like, what? And so it turns out that a customer perceived an interaction with myself and their child, because I was still underage, perceived my interaction with their daughter as inappropriate. They basically said I had stood next to her daughter, raised my shorts, and then went around. And I was like, why would I even do that? That doesn't make any sense. Um, and so at that point, I realized my manager, who was a Caucasian male, he was like, if you were anybody else, I would have fired you on the spot. And so it let me understand that dynamic of overt racism, because he wasn't a racist, but the overtness of racism
Mm.
had dissipated a little bit,
Mm.
and that people were really gauging me based on my merit and based on who I was as a person.
Mm.
And so my experience has been diverse. I've also had people who have, not liked me simply because of my race. I've had experiences with law enforcement where it's been very pleasant. I have quite a few friends in law enforcement. I've had experiences with law enforcement that didn't believe that I was on my way to church to play the piano because I had a suitcase in my car. Like, I've had all kinds of
Yeah.
experiences as a black man. But one of the things that I take out of every single experience is that, what role do I play? Because that's the role that I have control over. And so as I continue to try to grow into that space in my own life, and I think it's an ever growing journey, um, I think that my overall experience in America will be a very pleasant one,
Yep.
regardless if I'm black, white, or anything else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is one of the reasons why I love what you do on Interstations, right? Because it brings this sort of conversation up, and it
Mm-hmm.
allows us to kind of talk about it in our experiences as people in general, right?
Right.
Your experience as an African American is very similar to mine, but although there are some uniquenesses there as well too. If I was to talk to one of my Caucasian friends, they probably have some sort of similar experience to me or you, right? We just
Mm-hmm.
don't know all of their stories and how they go about their lives in America and what experiences they have. And that's one of the coolest things I love about Interstations is that it brings people together to have these kind of deep conversations, right?
Right.
We have a question from Mrs. Tamara Wade in the chat. She says, traditional thinking that it is that you have to go to college and get a degree in order for you to get a good job. You mentioned that you didn't go to college, but grew up in a career through independent thinking, self-taught, and job training. What advice would you give someone who is debating about further higher education, but want to further their career? Good question, Tamara.
That is a great question. My advice, and it's only based on my own experience, would be get yourself in position. And what I mean by that is if you're not going to be academically verified with a degree, then get yourself in position. Like I said, with that mail room methodology of I'm here for a reason, I'm here for a purpose, and the purpose is to move up. When you show up at the mail room with the purpose of moving up, you don't show up and just do mail. You show up in every aspect that you have the opportunity to show up in. One of the things for me is also being smart about the decisions that you make. So I knew from the moment that I stepped into the entry level analyst role that I had to stay in that role and exceed the expectation of that role for at least 5 years. Because after 5 years, then you can go to an interview and say, hey, you know what? I've been an analyst for 5 years, and this is the experience that I have. I know that you say you're looking for somebody with a college degree, but I would like to ask you that if I'd like to ask, do you value more experience or do you value book knowledge? Because book knowledge is great, and don't get me wrong, theory, all that stuff works, and it helps you with critical thinking. However, in my opinion, after some point, that book knowledge does not overcome what you have learned on the job, hands-on, interacting with day in, day out. So it will be present in the role that you're in, focus on a mindset of excellence in the work that you do, on the work ethic that you display, so that people are trusting to give you the opportunities that they have, that you could be underqualified for, but you are capable of doing.
Yeah, very good, very good. You have to put yourself in a model, like you said, to be able to grind and be self-taught and do the things that you need to do to position yourself to be really better than everyone else in that role. And what I find is a lot of people who choose not to go to university, they are masters at something, right? Or they become masters at something to where it's basically been their entire life studying on that thing. And, these are the people that will always have a job because, they've mastered a skill that that a lot of people don't have. But also at the same time, they're going to be valued because people are going to always be looking at them and looking for them to leverage those skills. So Mr. Brian Sr. said, overrepresented in prison and underrepresented in corporate America. That is absolutely true. That is absolutely true. And that's another reason why, Black Hats exists. I'm sure that's another reason why Interstations exists. It's about, showing the good in people in general. Black Heights
and our people specifically.
In our people specifically, absolutely. And the vision behind Black Heights is to prepare African Americans for upward mobility and management and leadership positions in corporate America. There are other areas around the world where African Americans are excelling at and things like that. But I'm in corporate America, so that's where my focus is at this point in time. And we're definitely getting there. So very good answer to that question. Mrs. Hazel says she totally agrees. And let's move on to some of the other questions here, Billy. What does success mean to you, sir?
So I guess when I was young, it meant money. And then as you get older and you realize no matter how much money you have, apparently there's a bill that's waiting for you to spend it on. So as I would say, as of like the last about 8 years, really what success has been about for me has been about legacy. What am I leaving behind? Part of that legacy for me is I have 3 sons. So leaving what type of quality individuals am I leaving behind once I'm no longer here to be that voice or that guidance to them or that disciplinary correction to them. What am I leaving behind from that legacy? Another reason for the First Row YouTube channel is because of legacy is information. Almost like when we were before technology, we were sitting around campfires and stories were handed down from generation to generation to generation. And now we live in an era where literally this video, my videos, can be recorded and documented to where later on, if my great grandson or granddaughter decides they want to know what their great grandfather thought or what type of person he was, they can plug into something that can give them that information and give them that perspective. So I'm really focused right now on success being, what legacy am I going to leave behind? What type of good am I going to contribute to humanity? I was on a video stream with Brother O'Shea, and one of the comments was, man, that guy's apartment is empty. And I was like, oh, it is kind of empty back there. but the thing for me isn't about how many material things I can possess. Number one, I'm in an apartment, and so I don't want to possess a lot of material things, because then when it comes time to move, then I have a bunch of material things that I have to move with me that are inconvenient for me to have to move. But number two, I don't see my legacy built up in the coffee table that I decided to acquire. I don't see it in the art that I necessarily decided to acquire or how I decorate where I'm dwelling at. So it's just, that's really for me at this point what success is. It's not about keeping up with the Joneses or keeping up some kind of facade or appearance. It's about, what am I leaving behind that is going to help people when they're sitting all alone, they're depressed, when they're sitting trying to figure out their career moves, when they're sitting trying to identify what their value and their worth for themselves is or are.
Mm-hmm. Leaving a legacy behind for your three boys, that is amazing. You know, that's something that leads to generational wealth. So I think that's absolutely amazing, Billy. You mentioned church, right? I think you grew up in the church.
Kind
what's
of.
your experience? Yeah. So you know, I had a interview with one of my good friends earlier this week, and you know, he talked about church. What is your experience with church, and if you don't mind sharing that?
So I didn't go to church, start going to church until I was like 15 or 16. I think 15. And so I wasn't raised in the church. I remember going before then when I was at my grandma's house during the summer. She would make us go, and I did not like going to church. But when I was 15, I kind of was going through this part in my life where I really needed to get a bearing on what direction I wanted to head into. And I remember calling a person who had invited me to church countless times, and I was like, hey, I'm coming to church tonight. And she was like, yeah, right, because she had invited me a lot of times, and every time I don't want to go to no church. So
you had other things to do, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I had other things to get into, and it was a very hard transition for me to go into church, because my parents never forced me into any type of specific religion. I don't think I ever heard my father say anything about God or the devil until my oldest son was in about the 6th grade. So when he said it, I was like, who are you talking about? Like, what do you mean? I was like, man, I've never heard you say God or the devil in any sentence, let alone the same sentence. So my experience with church was very pleasant. I got really active and involved in ministry, and that worked for me as a young man with no family, not a whole lot of responsibilities, not a whole lot of overhead. I was very active in the theater arts ministry. I was active in the choir, singing in the choir, transitioned to playing the piano for the choir, and then I had my oldest son, and a lot of that had to shift from being this young man in a church setting to being a father and a provider, and that has been my primary focus since that point. I will say church did teach me a lot about researching and knowing things for yourself. There were some parts of church that I didn't like, that I didn't care for, and that's partially why I don't attend church today. But overall, I learned some very valuable lessons. I believe I have a very intimate relationship with God. I don't try to Bible buff anybody to death. If the word speaks to you, it speaks to you. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And that's been my relationship as of late with church, as far as probably since like 23 till present. And I'm 37 now, so for about the past 14 years. I mean, every once in a while, I will go to church if there's like a funeral or something special that I've been asked to attend. But I do not have a church home. I have a Bible and I have a relationship. That's what I have.
Wonderful, wonderful. No, and the reason I asked that question is because a lot of my African American friends in my network, um, they are churchgoers and they have faith and they believe in God, and so do I. And I just wanted to throw that out there, just to get a response from you to see if that it was part of your life as well too. We have a question from Mr. Darcellus Reed, who's in the chat. He said, "Hey guys, I like the advice on going above and beyond your job description. What does your current role as an analyst or does your current role as an analyst require extended hours, and how do you balance work and life?" Good question, Marcellus.
Short answer, yes. Anytime your salary, there's going to be some extended hours. But it does require extended hours. However, it's one of the things I like about the organization I work for is they are very family focused. And to be such a large organization and to still be family focused, it is very encouraging. So for me, I live in Utah and my children live in Sacramento, California. And that's 680 miles, technically 679 miles from my doorstep to their house. And for me, work-life balance is very important because of the distance that I have between my children and still having that desire to be a very present and involved and engaged father. And so the way I balance things out is while I'm at work, I put in the work that I need to put in. Sometimes I don't take lunch. Sometimes I eat at my desk. Every once in a while, I say, you know what? I'm not eating at my desk today. I'm eating in the break room, or I'm eating at Chick-fil-A or something, just to get away from the computer. But on the same side of that, there's plenty of days where I typically get off at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'll look up and it's 4:30, and people are like, "Oh, you haven't left yet?" And I'm like, I've never been the person who was watching the clock like, "Oh, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I'm out." Yep. So I remember people were like, "Oh, you're lucky you work salary. I mean, you just get paid." And I was like, "Yeah, but there's days where I'm staying and you're going." We had a team outing on Tuesday that when everybody was done, a lot of people just went home. I still had work to do, so I had to come back and work for like another hour and a half, 2 hours to get the work that I set aside or that I didn't get to because I had left for the team outing. And I think that's where I try to find balance. I don't have so much of a problem with work-life balance because once I'm off of work, I pretty much leave work behind. Like if you need me to log on, you're going to have to call me in an emergency, but don't call me for something that's not an emergency, because then I may not answer your call next time. Just to be honest. But from the life perspective, I'm very calendar driven. So when things are on my calendar, they're happening. If they're not on my calendar, I might forget them. So I'm really big on things showing up on my calendar or reminders, whether that's friends' birthdays, certain, like my trip going back to California has been on my calendar, something I've been looking forward to. I'll be in California for 2 weeks to spend time with them. And that's how I create that work-life balance, is going back and spending a more than just a weekend with my sons, and still getting some work done while I'm in California working in a remote office. And then also taking vacation time right after that so that I get a full week of just spending time with my sons. I will have to turn on my laptop because I have a YouTube channel. But the fortunate thing is I think it'll be good for my sons to see, like, this is how you create content and this is what it looks like when you're presenting and you have an audience that you're speaking to.
Yep.
I hope that answers your question.
I think it does wonderfully, Billy. We got a comment from Miss Tiffany Wade, and she says, not a question, just a statement. Your previous answer of your experience reminded me of Antoine's Black Heights article titled Black Unicorn, corporate America isn't about race; it's about competition. So, yeah, Tiffany, that's a wonderful correlation. So, for the folks that's watching this live chat, and for the ones who will watch it in the future, I write a newsletter weekly about management and leadership topics related to African Americans and corporate America. And one of the articles that I recently wrote was about things called, or people called black unicorns. And what I mean by black unicorns, and these are the people who are in corporate America, have had a difficult path, but they don't see it being a racial issue. They think corporate America is about competition. And at the end of the day, it is about competition. It's about who's the best man in that situation. And if there are setbacks and failures, don't blame it just on race. Blame it on that you may not have been the best person for that role or the best person in that position at that point in time. So wonderful correlation, Tiffany. And for all the folks who want to subscribe to the newsletter, just visit the Black Heights site at www.blkheights.com and click on the newsletter and subscribe to it. It's a wonderful content that everyone can take something away from. And it's not just for African Americans, it's for everyone, because there's a learning lesson in every one of the articles that I write. So let's move on.
Can I piggyback on something on that?
Absolutely.
So the other thing about that is what I've learned in my experience is if you get passed up on an opportunity, the biggest thing that you can do is make them regret it. And I don't mean make them regret it in the malicious way. But just continue to be who you are and display the leadership that you have. And that happened to me in my last organization before I went into analytical work. I was passed up on a supervisor role that I thought I was really qualified for. And they hired somebody into the role who later on stepped down from the role. And then by the time they were coming around to start moving me towards the leadership roles, they were like, well, we can give you this lead position. And then my boss said, or we can give you this analyst position. And I was like, I'm going analytical, bye. And so in that analytical role, because that's also when I started doing inspirational speaking, I remember having a brief conversation with the director of the building from the customer service side. And she was like, you know what? One of the biggest mistakes I've ever made in this organization was not keeping you on my team and promoting you when I should have. And so that's what I mean by making them regret their decision. It's not maliciously, but it's like, right. Hey, look, I would have been an excellent manager for the call center and probably would have still been in the call center managing or trying to move up still. However, when that opportunity was there and they gave it to somebody who they perceived was the better person in the competition, they found out, darn, we should have went with that number one draft pick, and that's why we ended up losing him out of our department. And there were opportunities where they were like, if you want to come back to our department, you can. And I was like, nope. I'm not interested. So that is the other thing. And then the other thing is just, even when I was in the entry-level analytical role, my senior analyst, it was like, I would never be able to go up into his role because he didn't want to leave his role. And I had a very frank and comfortable conversation with him where I was like, hey, look, you don't have to worry about me coming for your role because I realize that you are entrenched in it. But at some point, I'm going to figure out how to get around you and leave you at your role so I can continue to grow. And so just don't let people put ceilings on you because you are below them. No, I'm below you right now, but you don't want to move. No problem. I'll just go around you and then you could still be where you're at. And it's not that I'm going to be above you and you're going to report to me, but I'm not going to let your ceiling for yourself stop me from going to where I believe my ceiling is.
No, that's wonderful. You brought up a good point about like being a first round draft pick, right? It's kind of, there's a relation with sports, and you think about the people who, I can say like, Aaron Rodgers, who was passed up in the NFL draft and ended up being one of the best quarterbacks of all times, right? It's like the people who didn't select him, he made them regret it. So that is absolutely, it's true. It's absolutely true. You want to be that kind of a person. And I wholeheartedly agree with you. If I wasn't picked on a basketball team or in a hooping at the YMCA or something like that, I wanted to go out there and show the team who I was playing against who didn't pick me on if they were the losing team, why they should have picked me, right? So
Right.
that's
It's my personal mission to give you this.
exactly. I'm gonna give it to you, right? And I'm gonna boom on you, right? So yeah, I completely understand. You talked about you growing up in a diverse environment. What does diversity mean to you? I mean, what's your definition of diversity?
I don't have a clear definition for diversity. However, I believe that the definition of diversity has been skewed because of color being this driving force on, oh, well, we got to diversify. We need 60% yellow and 20% white and 20% black, and and maybe take some of the 60% and now balance it out, and we'll give 30% to brown. And this, I think that diversity has been very skewed because of in my opinion, a lazy method of categorization. Really, what diversity has to do with the different types of mindsets and the different ways that we all process information uniquely. And so when I look at diversity, the organization that I work in is a very diverse organization, and they believe in diversity in the sense of color and, making sure there's different employee resource groups for, gays and for blacks and for Asians and for young professionals. They have all these different things. However, I've always seen diversity as the mindset because the people that I've surrounded myself with throughout my life have not all been these identical replicas of me. They have been different people that see things differently. That's why they're able to approach me when they see that I'm handling something wrong, or they perceive that it's not the best path, or I'm not doing something to the maximum full potential that I can. They're able to approach me and give me that diversity of thought to say, hey, Wroe, you didn't need to do that way, or you shouldn't have jumped down that person's throat this way, or maybe you should look at doing things maybe a little bit more along the lines of this. So I keep diversity around me in the sense of the minds that I keep around me. And to me, that is what true diversity is being willing to have conversations with people, respectful conversations with people that you may not agree with, but understand that just because you don't agree doesn't mean that you guys can't interact on some other levels. That, to me, that's what diversity is.
That's a very good answer. Differences of the mind. I certainly agree with that. I also think there's if you think about the experiences of people of different colors, there's a difference between people who grow up a lot of the times in black communities and white communities or Asian communities or Latino communities, right? And I believe part of that is diversity as well too. But absolutely, I wholeheartedly agree that diversity of the mind is part of what diversity is. You talked about living in Utah. What is it like living in Utah? I personally don't know. I don't think I know any black people in Utah. What is it like in Utah?
So there are black people in Utah because I'm here.
You're the only one. It's kind of like corporate America, right?
I'm that black unicorn you wrote about.
Oh, good one, brother.
Utah is a very interesting place. So I had never been to Utah prior to taking my job in Utah. I take that back. They flew me out for one interview and then I took the job. But they asked me in the interview, like, oh, so have you always wanted to move to Utah? I was like, no. Like, what are you talking about? Nobody says, where I really want to move? Utah. There are some people who say that, but I'm not one of those people. Yep. But it is a place that I honestly, being here for the past year, I have learned to enjoy the outdoors more. In the springtime, there's beautiful places to hike, beautiful hidden waterfalls, beautiful hidden caves. And people are like, oh, you're out there doing that crazy stuff. I'm not, trust me, I still have my wits and my awareness about myself. But it's allowed me to enjoy the world in a different way. And it's also taught me about how to make the most about the environment that you're in. Coming to Utah, where I have zero network, don't know anybody outside of pretty much Comcast. That was when I first got here. It was difficult to acclimate, and I found myself flying out of Utah like a couple times a month, like whether I was going back to California to see my sons or going to Vegas to hang out with friends. Like I was just like, I gotta get out of here. Like this place is crazy. I gotta get out of here. There is a predominant Caucasian presence in Utah. But the funny thing is it's not really split by like color per se. It's actually split by religion, where there's the people who are Mormons, and that is the predominant religion of Utah. A lot of the laws are structured around the belief of Mormonism. And then there are people who are not Mormons, and I fall into the people who are not Mormons category. And so you start finding that there's actually a religious divide. And the Mormons are nice people. Like, they'll talk to you, they'll try to convert you over into Mormonism, and you just tell them, if that's not what you're about, that's not what you're about. And I'm like, hey, I'm not here seeking faith. I think one of them tried to start a conversation when I first got here, was like, we're in a place where everybody thinks the world is coming to an end. I was like, I don't think that. And he was like, oh man, that, you could see on his face, like, well, that was my lead in to, like, don't despair, don't fret not, and all these different things. It's like, no, I don't think the world's coming to an end at all. I don't think it's falling off its axis anytime soon. And so it just kind of like, oh snap, I don't know what to say to that. I was like, all right, have a good day. And I go back in my apartment. So being in Utah has really taught me a lot about trusting who I am as an individual. I believe that I'm a quality individual. Doesn't mean I don't make mistakes, doesn't mean I don't have a past, but I believe I'm a quality individual, and the people that I have established relationships with outside of work, even though it's only like 3, they are an indication that the quality that I see, they also see. And it lets me continue to trust myself to continue to make leaps of faith into other areas, whether that's leaving Utah and not heading back to California, or heading back to California. It makes me comfortable in my ability to figure things out.
Very good. Very good. No, I hear Utah is a beautiful state with, and I'm assuming you're in Salt Lake City, right? Where are you at?
I'm about 15 minutes south of Salt Lake City, in a suburb of Sandy.
I hear a beautiful area, lots of things to do, lots of natural parks, lots of outdoor things to do, beautiful scenery, geography. I hear it's just wonderful, and the Four Seasons is wonderful. I hear too.
Yes. I mean, like, you'll see I guess I've seen it in Sacramento before, but I never really appreciated it. But like, you'll see hills change color in fall, and it's like one of the most beautiful sights that you'll ever see. My apartment, like, I'm 15 minutes from the foot of a mountain, the base of a mountain. And literally, when, like, people have come from Sacramento or California or other places to visit me, and we're driving back to my apartment, they're like, you're surrounded by mountains and it's beautiful. Like, I'm like, yeah, this is my appreciation of the view that I have every day. I'm not in a penthouse suite by any means, but it's nice to pull up and see, as you're pulling towards your little stall in your apartment, a beautiful mountain range, like, directly in front of you as you drive.
I can tell you one thing: there's beauty everywhere that I've been. Unfortunately, I haven't been to Utah yet, but I'll certainly get there pretty soon.
Hey man, if you come, let me know. I got you.
Wonderful. So for anyone watching this show, and anyone who's going to come back and watch the show, let's talk about 3 important things that you want to leave them as a takeaway from this conversation. What are those 3 things you think, Billy, that you want to resonate in the minds of our viewers at this point in time from this conversation?
I would say the first thing goes back to what you said about being competitive and being in competition. Part of that is observing, obviously, people on the outside, but be in competition with yourself. And that's why my mantra is we are who we are today because of whom we practiced being yesterday. That is a self-competing mantra for me. So I look at what I did yesterday, what I didn't do yesterday, and say, okay, well, what am I going to do today to feel better about this tomorrow? And so that's what drives me, is that self-competition, more so than the competing with people who, I mean, if you're smarter than me, you're smarter than me. All I can do is work to increase my intelligence, but I may never be smarter than you. If you're continuing to work on yourself, I may never catch up. So that would be the first thing, is just really having that competitor spirit, but focusing the competition on the internal. And as you focus on that internal, the external will begin to manifest and take care of itself almost.
Got it.
The second thing would be know your worth. One of the reasons why I live in Utah now is because I felt as if I was undervalued as an analyst in California. And the fortunate thing of being an analyst, I had hard facts of the financial undervalue of the role that I was working in. And I received a couple of promotions. I think I received 3 promotions while I was an analyst. That gave me more revenue, but it didn't give me the value of which I felt that I had earned. And so it came to a point where I no longer, I was appreciative that my former boss gave me the opportunity to step into analytics.
Mm-hmm.
However, I no longer felt the value of being underneath him, and no longer felt appreciated as an employee. So for me, literally, like, I put my notice in with like a conversation that just went bad. And it wasn't like, well, fine, I quit. It was very professional. It was like, you know what? We have reached the point in the journey where I'm going to resign, give you a 3-week notice. I'll do any SOPs you want me to write, do any training you want me to do. But this particular part of this path is coming to an end. And that is because I knew my worth. And when I went into my next opportunity, I was very upfront with what my financial worth was and what would need to be met financially for me to seize the opportunity. And I had that perception of my worth and my value, even without having a job. So my worth was not connected to I had a job, so I had some leverage or something to take care of bills while I go and look for another job. I was without a job and was like, this is still my standard. Yep. And if you can't meet my standard, then sorry, we can't do business, because I know what type of employee you're going to get. You may not know, and you may have questions. However, internally, I don't have questions. And I feel that I've performed very well in my first year in the organization. And there's plenty of other growth to be had in this organization as I continue my path there. So that would be the second thing, is knowing your worth. And then I think the third and the final thing, honestly, is just about having a good compass. And that comes from reflection, taking time to reflect. Going back to, because Tiffany said it was a great answer, making people regret that they made their decision to pass you up on an opportunity. That has to do with reflection. Sometimes when we hear or we feel those moments of rejection where, well, they didn't pick us, or they didn't want us to be the person in the team, or the man or the woman, we adopt that story and allow it to become our truth. And I did a long time ago a video talking about our stories become our truths. And so for me, it's about being able to have that compass that is attached to what you're reflecting on, your experiences, and taking time to see what you could have done better, because that is honestly how you're going to grow. But also taking time to celebrate your achievements, and that's not a lifelong party. So don't get stuck there celebrating, like Al Bundy. I did 4 touchdowns in a single game, but don't get stuck there. But be willing to celebrate and also be willing to grow. So those would be the 3 things: be competitive within yourself. Make sure you're taking that time to reflect, and hopefully be the one who has the least amount of regrets. And then,
know your worth. Know your worth, brother.
Thank you. Knowing your worth.
No, that's wonderful takeaways, Billy. And I like to ask people what the takeaways are, because I like to reiterate them, but also talk about what I took away from this conversation as well. Right? Is the points that you just reiterated. Be competitive, absolutely. That article about the black unicorns really put it in perspective that life is about competition, right? It's about being the best person of yourself, the best version of yourself. Knowing your worth, absolutely. You're not going to get anywhere without knowing your worth. And knowing your worth is when you know your worth, you're confident, you understand what you want, you understand where you're going. Take time to reflect. Absolutely. Whenever you have accomplishments, you can go back and take time to reflect. But also, if you aren't chosen for something, right? Be better the next time. But also, look back and say, when you are further ahead, say, I bet you wish that you would have took that opportunity with me, right?
Right.
The other piece of it is, success is not about money for everyone. Success is about leaving a legacy behind. And I thought that was wonderful, Billy. And if I was to say the last thing is, it's create your own opportunities. opportunities are going to come to you in life when you create them on your own. You are a self-taught VBA, coder, self-taught Excel analyst, and look at you. You're excelling in your career and doing great things, not only in your professional career, your personal career as well. And you also have a YouTube career as well. You know, self-taught. That's how you get better. It's absolutely wonderful. So creating opportunities would definitely be the last one that I took away from this, Billy. So, sir, wonderful, wonderful interview. I really appreciate
man, no, I've been waiting to have this conversation. I've enjoyed it. Appreciate you.
I've been waiting to have you on the show, and you know, I can't wait to continue the dialogue with you, especially watching all the things that you're doing on YouTube and all the knowledge that you're bringing to the viewers that are subscribed to your channel. So, Mr. Wroe, before we wrap this up, tell people how they can get a hold of you on YouTube, in your personal life, on your website, any sort of social media. Tell people how they can get a hold of you.
So the easiest way to get a hold of me is through social media right now. That is, everything is First Wroe. That's 1STWROE, all one word. That you can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn. And literally everything is First Wroe. You can also find my First Wroe YouTube channel on YouTube. I have content every Tuesday. Obviously this Christmas, I won't have content on that day, but I have secondary content on Wednesdays, and that's the Wednesday Word. So you can typically find me on every Wednesday for the Wednesday Word at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Interstations are typically on Tuesday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. But yeah, I mean, other than that, you're welcome to reach me. I'll put my email because it's a little longer. I'll put that into the actual chat so that it can be there for anybody who has any questions or wants to reach out to me, or, you know, whatever it may be. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm pretty good about responding to emails. But that's pretty much it. Either you can find me on anything. You can put First Wroe, 1STWROE in Google, and whatever comes up, you're welcome to message me there. Or I'll put my email in the chat so that it's available for everybody as well.
Wonderful. And guys who are watching this, you're on YouTube, jump on Billy's channel, First Wroe, and subscribe. The guy put out some really good content. His conversations are with wonderful people, a combination of interview and conversation. And on Wednesdays, he has a Wednesday Word, which is a strong, inspiring message to his followers. So, Billy, I appreciate it again, sir. Thank you so much. And all the viewers, guys, thank you so much for supporting us and watching us and interacting with us as well. So we will see you guys again. It. Absolutely. We will see you guys again on next Tuesday. And till then, have a good night. Peace.
Good night.
Good night.